Hello, everyone. Welcome to the APO Productivity Talk. This is Ted Young from the Asian Productivity Organization, or the APO. We're broadcasting from Tokyo, Japan, and I wish you a very good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world at this moment, especially if you're living under a lockdown situation or practicing self-isolation. The APO is an international organization supporting sustainable socio-economic development of Asia and the Pacific by promoting inclusive and innovation-led productivity growth. One of our focuses is industrial development, especially the upgrading and development of small and medium-sized enterprises in the manufacturing sector, which have been particularly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic because of the suspension of work, shortage of workforce, and unstable supply and demand in supply chains. So this productivity talk is dedicated to be a platform to discuss with you about the current situation and how we can take this challenging time as an opportunity to enhance resilience in our industries and our businesses, who are the backbones of our economies. Today, we invite you to join the discussion with Mr. Jackie Tan, the Vice President of Digital Service of TÜV SÜD Asia Pacific. Jackie is responsible for Industry 4.0 advisory services in TÜV SÜD and has been working closely with manufacturers to understand, to design, and to realize their strategies in digital upgrading. He has been closely working with government agencies in formulating and implementing strategies for manufacturing transformation, including the development of the Smart Industry Readiness Index, which helps companies to diagnose their readiness for digital upgrading. He had extensive experiences in advanced manufacturing and has closely worked with companies from different sectors and different parts of their global supply chain. Therefore, we are very happy to have him today to share with us his observations on the challenges faced by the manufacturers during this pandemic and the opportunities he sees for building resilience and flexibility in supply chains, so that we can timely respond to and recover from this crisis. So, Jackie, good afternoon for Singapore. Do you want to say hi to everyone?
Thank you, Ted, and thank you, APO, for the opportunity for us to share with you about the manufacturing industry that we see in this pandemic time. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who's on the line. So I look forward to share my experience and, of course, our observations in this manufacturing transformations journey.
Wonderful. You look amazing in a lockdown situation in Singapore.
Yeah,
apparently you have excelled your barbering skills during this.
I try to use the wax to make sure it looks tidy. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for making the time today to discuss with us. So I will soon invite you to make a quick presentation for our audience. In the next 30 minutes, we'll be listening and learning from you, and we will take maybe another 20 to 30 minutes to take the questions from the internet, because currently we have a lot of viewers joining us. They are all curious about what's going on at the moment and how we can help our manufacturing sector. But before that, I hope to remind our viewers that you can put your questions, join the discussion by putting remarks and questions in the chat room section of the YouTube channel. We will collect the question and get Jackie to respond to it or to discuss with you. Please identify your name, your country, and your question. So who you are, where you are from, and what you're asking. And please try to keep your questions short, concrete, and connected to the topic. If we don't have enough time, please leave your questions in the comment section, and we'll get back to you later. Okay, so without further ado, I hope to invite Jackie to share his insights about the current situation and how our manufacturing sector to respond to this. Jackie, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ted. And thank you, everyone. I hope everyone could see my presentations full screen. Ted, could you do a quick check for me that you can see my presentation?
Yes, it's perfect.
Perfect. Thanks. Once again, the topic of my presentation today, or my sharing today, is about how could companies minimize disruptions during this COVID-19 pandemic. Now, throughout my presentations, I'm going to share with you 4 different points. Number 1, what are our observations on the industry right now due to COVID-19? Point number 2, where are the evolutions going? Where are manufacturing heading in next 3 to 6 months, where companies are moving ahead? Point number 3, what is actually Industry 4.0 and why is it relevant for companies right now to adopt it, especially to be resilient in their manufacturing, of course, in the supply chain. 4th point, I'm going to share with you a quick studies how a company actually adopt Industry 4.0 and how that actually helped the companies in this pandemic time. And finally, I'll pass the mic back to Ted for questions and answers. All right. First of all, industry observation in this pandemic time. So what do we see right now in this pandemic time? What we believe is that 41% actually are trying to identify where and how they could start their, let's say, transformations. We also see that 41% of manufacturing really lack of focus. They struggle or they're struggling to understand what is actually Industry 1.0. And due to this pandemic time, there's a lack of focus for companies or even for manufacturers to identify projects. And based on our observation, we see companies right now are working on ad hoc projects. And very much we see companies are really working on a silo projects to address current needs. In addition to that, we also see companies are having difficulties in resource management. Due to several instances, we also do see that companies struggling to manage their workforces, to manage the supply chain. And very often, companies are acting with an unclear and reactive approach in this pandemic time. Now, beyond that, we also do see that 23% actually of companies right now are in the midst of defining a blueprint, how they could transform their organizations. Now, this 23% may seem relevant, but we also do see that many companies has missed the opportunity, or in fact, they are missing the opportunities because simply there's a delays in them defining a roadmap or even defining what is relevant for them in terms of Industry 4.0 transformations to tackle the pandemic situations. Now, because of these delays in defining roadmap and of course implementations, we do also see that companies now are starting to lose their market share and even so to lose their manufacturing competitiveness. So we do see that observations based on our research. Now, the third point, we also do see that 19% of companies are facing the challenges of legacy systems. If you are from manufacturers, you could have legacy machines, legacy assets, and legacy computer-based systems. And very often, it's a challenge to maintain the machines, the assets, and even the systems uptime. And because of that, because of these legacy systems and because of the maintenance, now we do see that companies are struggling to keep up with productivity. Very often, if you speak to any manufacturers, the first keywords is productivity, all right? And in this talk, it's also really to remind everyone, it's all about productivity. And very often we forgot about the fact there's also quality, right? There's productivity gains, there's quality improvement, of course, and there's a speed and flexibility. Now, for companies to really understand where are they in this pandemic time, we do recommend to address legacy systems and availability. You should look into these 4 areas: your organization productivity, your organization quality, your organization speed, and finally, your organization flexibility, all right? And last point, we do see that 70% of companies lack visibility in the operations and supply chain, all right? There's a missing transparency between the factory operations and the supply chain processes. And very often we see there's a challenge in this area, how companies actually react to that, all right? 17% of companies right now struggling to know what is the inventory in the factory, and 17% of companies that we see, they really do not know what is the manufacturing capacity versus the raw materials availability. So there's a missing element between the manufacturing capacity and of course, the raw materials availability. And due to that, companies are also not agile in their decision-making process, right? Very often there's a delays of information coming in from the outside world or even from the inside world. And very often companies struggling to make the decisions at any given time and due to this delay. And the third point, now we see companies lack in speed and flexibility. As I mentioned, very much companies are focusing in improving productivity, improving quality, but we do see now, due to this pandemic time, companies are now struggling with keeping up with speed and the right flexibility. So the keywords here, how could companies embark on what we call flexible manufacturing operations, or even so, a flexible supply chain to ensure that they have the right, let's say, supply chain resilience set up in their organization. So resilience, flexibility, and speed. These are areas that we do see what's going on in the industry. And I think based on the next, let's say, 3 months, there's a need for companies to really focus on their speed, flexibility, and of course, maintaining their resilience in manufacturing and supply chain management. Now, moving forward, let's look into how are we doing in Singapore. Now, in Singapore, 20% of our manufacturing actually detects our GDP. So quite a high GDP in Singapore, despite such a small country. Now, if you look into our, let's say, our announcement from government, actually, we are doing fairly well actually in manufacturing, and simply because there's a strong export from two sectors, as you can imagine, biomedical manufacturing sectors, and of course, pharmaceuticals. So you can see there's certain benefits behind why the countries is diversing their manufacturing portfolio. No longer we look into typical, let's say, automotive or even, let's say, discrete manufacturing, but there are pharmaceuticals and biomedical supplies out from the country. Now, post-COVID-19, we do see that there's a new normal of working for everyone. Social distancing remains, all right? This is the basic, let's say, business continuity management does remain. So post-COVID-19, we do see that there's a new normal of working in every industry, let it be in the manufacturing industry. Now, we do see that there's a disrupted supply chain, and of course, workforce management. As you know that there's a limited amount of numbers we can deploy to a factory due to business continuity plans, and of course, restrictions that has been applied globally, let it be locally. So we do see that there is a disrupted supply chain and workforce management. Now in Singapore, the circuit breaker is going to end on 1st of June. We do see that people in the country are slowly getting back to work, especially right now. People are really slowly getting back to work. And then we do see this is a good sign where we are back slowly to the business. Now, to ensure this resilience, flexibility, it's one key area. And this is where, as a company, as an organization, we should all look into how could we enhance our organizational flexibility and how could we enhance resilience in your supply chain and in your workforce. Now, what are the different business impacts that we've seen due to COVID-19? Number one, we do see that there are difficulties right now in sourcing and procurement. Okay, typically companies or even for the buyers, purchaser, there's a let's say element of meet up that is missing. We no longer do face-to-face meeting. We do Teams meeting, we do virtual meeting, and this may pose as a challenge for procurement team or even for sourcing team to make the right decision. So that's the first thing that we see. Second point, we do see labor shortages and management, as you know, due to the restrictions imposed by manufacturing companies, by industry, and there's a challenge in workforce management simply due to labor shortages. Third point, delay or even shortages in obtaining raw materials due to the, let's say, logistic movements, right? As you also can imagine, there are less container now in the sea, and there are also less aircraft flying around. This means that the raw materials could also be a challenge for many manufacturers. The fourth point, new regulatory requirements. So every companies, every countries, every organizations do now impose new regulations, and we do also share with you that in Singapore, of course, we do have certain regulations, and this is actually posing a new challenge for organizations to, let's say, in order to be more competitive in their way of working. So keep in mind, new regulatory requirements. It's not to impose new rules for you, but it's to make sure that we all are in a safe and secure environment. The fifth point, shortages in or stoppages in productions. Now, due to lack of raw materials, potentially due to lack of, let's say, manpower or even laborers, there could be also challenges in productions. One of our clients that we've seen recently is that they have the right manpower, they have the right raw materials, but the assets, the machines are not being maintained properly because of this, let's say, a pandemic time. So they couldn't run the operations. They have to further stop the factories for 5 days simply because they have to re-maintain the assets. All right. If you are from manufacturing industry, you do know what are the key 5 elements for you to continue your operations. All right. There's man. All right. There's materials. All right. And there's your manufacturing methods. Correct. And there's machines. All right. And finally, your measures. All right. These are the 5 areas we do urge companies to continue look into. How do you maintain these 5 elements? I repeat myself again: man, method, machines, materials, and measures. So keep that in mind. How do you, let's say, further enhance or further manage your factories or your organizational 5M? And last but not least, shortages in inventory. All right, so we do see that certainly supply chain struggling to know what is their current inventory, let it be inside the factory or outside at customer site. So do actually look into how do you manage your raw materials and of course your inventory as part of your, let's say, new way of working. All right, we do see this actually not only in Singapore but globally. This could be the business impact due to COVID-19. Now, I would like to share with you a slide. What could be the future of manufacturing? If you were to see my slides right now, there are about 7 points or 7 business functions that I'd like to share with you. They are namely IT and data collections, manufacturing process and design, asset and equipment, quality, supply chain management, workforce management, and finally, enterprise processes. I will go through one by one just to share with you what is the current state and what could be the potential future state, all right, due to digitalizations or even due to, let's say, moving into integrations of Industry 4.0 to the specific business function. Number 1, for IT and data collections, currently we do see companies are still, let's say, collecting data offline using analog tools, and they do use IT systems to improve critical operating parameters. So where we do see that there are companies today, and largely companies today, especially the SME, they are still working using offline data collections and IT systems to improve critical parameters. And in the future state, we also do see companies now has deployed a real-time system analytics and intelligent sensors control to enable flexible manufacturing operations. So if you would like to really push your factory, transform your factory towards what we call flexible operations, do look into how could you achieve a real-time system analytics and intelligent sensors control for your factory. So that is where we see what could be the future state of companies. And we have seen this actually deployed to several factories. Secondly, in manufacturing process and design. Now, we do see that if you are from typical manufacturing companies, you do deploy lean principles or even more towards Six Sigma implementations to standardize your manufacturing processes. Even if you are from a, let's say, typical enterprise, for instance, APO, yeah, you do apply lean principles, and of course, Six Sigma principles to ensure standardization for your organizations. If not, we can help you. But moving forward, we also do see that companies are now combining lean principles with digitalizations and sensor data to monitor and even to simulate detailed process parameters and perform optimization. So no longer companies are just deploying lean principles to improve productivity. Companies now are actually deploying lean and digitalization together, integrating lean principles and digitalization together to monitor real time and even so to simulate process parameters and perform optimizations based on a given customer's requirements. So keep that in mind, how you should actually work with lean manufacturing and digitalizations together to transform your manufacturing companies. Now, if we go into the third topic, asset and equipment. Now, typically, if you are manufacturing companies, right, you do always do a scheduled downtime and maintenance, and this typically is managed by rule-based principles such as OEE. Now, when you do a scheduled downtime, the questions that we normally ask the clients is that how do you schedule it by every 3 months, or is it based on your machine's conditions? And what we see that today, many companies do deploy what we call scheduled downtime. Every 3 months or every 360 or every 180 days, they will do a maintenance. That's assuming the assets are running full-time or running in a predefined parameters. And we know that due to the pandemic time, there are assets that has been shut. There are factories that are no longer working because simply there's no demand or there's a disruptions to their factories. And the scheduled downtime maintenance program might not be valid anymore because you have a different operating considerations for your assets. And due to that, we do see that companies now has deployed sensory-based health monitorings to drive maintenance activities with condition monitorings and potentially predicts anomalies. So right now, companies in the future step do deploy sensors-enabled machines, sensors-enabled assets to do condition monitoring, real-time condition monitoring, and even so to predict potential anomaly for the asset. That's to ensure that the machines is always running at a full, let's say, health monitoring status. And the keywords for this, if a companies were to adopt a future step of asset and equipment performance, do look into how could you deploy what we call a real-time OEE to your organization. I will share with you OEE in the next few slides. Just keep in mind how could you achieve OEE for your organization in a real-time set. Now, next point, quality. We also do see that company does scheduled sampling and manual inspections. You do your sampling, you do your inspection ad hoc using 2D based systems, correct? You do use let's say basic barometers or basic tools to make sure that your product is always within the right quality specifications. Now we also do see that companies has now deployed real-time process product quality to monitors, and typically this is linked to the cyber physical systems of their organizations. So think about how could companies go into real-time process monitoring, augmented with 3D inspections or even with, let's say, cyber physical systems. In supply chain management, we do see that now companies today, they use, let's say, certain 2D systems, 2D barcode systems to, let's say, monitor, even to track their raw materials or inventory. In future steps, we do see companies now deploy what we call a supply chain platform to monitor and even to manage the supply chain. In my case study later on, I will share with you a typical supply chain platform that the company has deployed to manage the supply chain in order to achieve what we call a resilient supply chain management. Workforce management, right? Typically, we see companies deploy skill assessment metrics tool, and that's just basic enough for companies to know whether is my workforce capable or able to perform certain tasks. Future step, we do see that companies has deployed regular continuous workforce management, and there's also real-time monitoring of workforce health management using RFID tech or using certain sensors to ensure the workforce is always, let's say, ready to perform certain tasks. Finally, enterprise processes. We do see that today, many of the enterprise processes are performed using analog tools such as Excel, paper-based, or even emails, right? Enterprise processes is typically your administrative tasks. And in this pandemic time, this is the biggest challenge for companies because very often we are used to, let's say, pen and papers, emails, communication, phone call communications. And when it comes to, let's say, less face-to-face meeting, all right, there's a need to have a more effective, let's say, digital tools to foster enterprise management. And this is where we have seen companies now do automate enterprise processes using computer-based systems. And do a recommendation for you, do look into how could you deploy robotics process automations to your organization. Now, I will just quickly touch on the concept, what we call horizontal integrations. If you are a company who really like to adopt, let's say, a resilient or even a flexible supply chain, horizontal integration will be a key concept for you in order to adopt this resilient supply chain. What we mean by that is a concept where companies should look into how could they optimize the flow of data and products from suppliers through the company and the customers. The benefits simply, it helps companies to improve and increase their supply chain resilience such that they are able to monitor a real-time performance of their upstream suppliers all the way to the downstream customers. Second point, it helps you to improve your workforce efficiency such that you as a company is able to plan and execute processes more efficiently and even with real-time execution capability. Third point, agility. If you were to adopt horizontal integrations, it really helps you to be agile. It enables you to make real-time decisions making via simulations of scenario. There's a lot of information in this topic. Unfortunately, due to the time constraint, I'm not able to share with you about horizontal integrations. I hope I have the opportunity next time, actually, together with APO, to give you a masterclass potentially about what is actually horizontal integration. But if you were to do your own research, do check out what we mean by horizontal integration, especially in the context of Industry 4.0. Now, based on the research from i4 Transport 2019, we do see that 61% of professionals are expecting to, let's say, have demand or require extra capacities over the next few years. And due to that, there's a need also to deploy new technologies. There's a need to deploy new functionalities to the supply chain or even to the manufacturing, such as the first thing that we see right now, 55% actually stated that they require automated warehouse. Right, 55% based on the research mentioned that they require automated warehouse. And simply, we do see this right now for manufacturing because you need to know basically your raw materials real time. You will also need to know your inventory real time. And simply by deploying more automations technology to your warehouse, it enables you to have real time, accurate track and trace data of your supply chain. So keep that in mind, how you should deploy warehouse automations to your organizations. Now, let me share with you a quick case study about a flexible supply chain that has been deployed by one of a company. This company is a German company. As you know, TÜV SÜD is also a German company, but this company is a German company. They have about 33 factories globally, and they have about 47 warehouses globally as well. They do produce, let's say, fast-moving consumer goods, can be ranges from your beauty care or even from your laundry and home care. So some of the products that you see might be, let's say, easily recognized by you. So this is one of the case studies where they have deployed what we call a supply chain platform to the organization to enable end-to-end digitalizations. Now, what we see this company is that the company itself is a world-leading chemical and consumer goods. Their major division is on laundry, home care, adhesive technology, and even beauty care. So this is typically a FMCG company. What we do see that one of the key challenges back then, not now, but back then, there's a market demand that they need to be faster, of course, cheaper, and to have more agile processes, no longer a very rigid production processes, there's a demand due to fast-moving consumer goods. They have to be faster, cheaper, and more agile. There's also a need for them to improve OEE. Very often, every factory has their own OEE, and they also would like to know how could they monitor OEE across the whole 33 manufacturing factories. Of course, due to they are making chemical products, there's a need to look into how do they reduce specific energy consumptions and to further enhance sustainability. The third point, the company has a challenge to look into visibility and transparency. All right, there is a need to adopt an agile and lean to ensure they don't get left behind in a competitive and dynamic market. So these are the top 3 challenges that the company, let's say, would like to address as part of their transformations towards Industry 4.0. What they have deployed, they have actually deployed what we call a digitally enabled real-time global OEE boosting platform. All right. So for some who are not familiar with the terms OEE, it represents overall equipment effectiveness. All right. There's a specific calculation behind, but just keep in mind it stands for overall equipment effectiveness. It shares with you how effectively is your assets performing. Now, this company itself, they actually deploy what we call a platform that they're able to connect all the shop floor assets, the machineries, and computer-based systems using IoT gateway, such that the data gathered from the shop floor across the 33 factories are continuously analyzed remotely. Keep in mind the terms. Many companies can mention that we are able to monitor our factory OEE, we are able to know the performance of assets, but when we ask about the keywords, are you able to do it remotely? That may be a challenge for you as well. So this company actually not only deploy OEE systems for their factories, but they're able to monitor the OEE of the assets remotely. So keep that in mind, the keywords, how do you monitor your assets, machinery, and computer-based system remotely? Second point, they also did deploy what we call a digitally integrated end-to-end demand sensing, right? This typically touch into the supply chain arena. What they did, they deploy cloud computing to integrate factory, processes, and warehouse data for real-time productions and supply chain visibility. So they did standardize measurements. How can they deploy a standard set of measurements for all the factories, all the warehouse, and how do they effectively calculate the KPI? If you look into diagrams on the left-hand side, that shares with you how they are able to achieve what we call a track and trace, a real-time monitoring of their logistic, a real-time monitoring of their, let's say, supply chain, using what we call a supply chain platform. They have been also recognized by the World Economic Forum, whereby they achieve what we call an end-to-end connected digital lighthouse. So this company is actually one of the recognized lighthouse factory by the World Economic Forum. So what they have achieved so far, they actually managed to increase overall company OEE, not the factory OEE. If you can imagine, they actually increased the overall company OEE by 50%. They also achieved a 20% increase in forecast accuracy, 12% in logistic costs, and finally 10% in the processing costs. Simply, they are able to monitor and able to analyze the organizations, the factories, the warehouse, and even the supply chain performance in real-time steps. So keep in mind, if you wanted to go into what we call a digitalization, it's not about deploying AI, predictive analytics, digital twins. It's really about how are you able to monitor your factories real-time set or even remotely. That will be the minimum that I will recommend for you as a company. How could you achieve a monitoring of your organizations or even your factory remotely in real time? Now, a quote from this company, Hankow, actually that's a company name called Hankow. How Hankow is using supply chain platform to navigate the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. So this is a quote from them actually. Let me just also go through with you. Having a supply chain platform means that we are able to use real-time data and generate insights to maneuver through the COVID-19 crisis as smoothly as possible. All of our major KPIs are online. So KPIs are online and managers can easily access them from home which greatly benefits their businesses in this unprecedented time. They also rapidly built a number of new reports using the system. So reports are built in the systems to assist with these efforts. This includes a dashboard to monitor their global stock of PPE, personal protective equipment, ensuring companies or employees are properly protected throughout the facilities. They have also created a sales and operations planning dashboard that managers can access it remotely. Right? Again, I've been saying the keywords here, remotely and real time, right? To support the alignment between the different business requirements. So think about how could you monitor your supply chain, your operations, your factory, and your logistic real time remotely. So that's what they have achieved to maneuver during this, let's say, pandemic time. Now, for you to really kickstart your Industry 4.0 transformations, all right? Research shows that, based on our research, it shows that there's a slow adoption of Industry 4.0 implementations. There's a need to help companies to prioritize because simply there could be too many projects they would like to do. There's a need for them to prioritize. And the third point, they will really want to identify the focus area to make informed decisions and effective resource allocation. These are the three key observations that we have seen so far. And the third point, we as a company, TÜV SÜD as a company, we also work closely with Singapore Economic Development Board to launch the Smart Industry Readiness Index to help companies to effectively and rigorously evaluate their Industry 4.0 readiness and also help companies to prioritize the key focus areas. So that's what we have done by deploying what we call an Industry 4.0 readiness assessment using the tool which is called the Smart Industry Readiness Index. Objective here is really to help you to grow, to migrate from computerizations all the way to soft optimization. So this is the journey where we see companies are typically, let's say, moving on from Industry 3.0 and Industry 4.0. Unfortunately, due to the time constraint, I couldn't elaborate more, but generally we see the trend of how companies are migrating from Industry 3.0 all the way to Industry 4.0. We did, together with Singapore Economic Development, EDB, we did an analysis actually on the current gaps based on our assessments of companies. And believe it or not, largely, the biggest gap we see is connectivity, right? That ties into real-time and remote. Right? And this is where we also do see that this gap is actually definitely, certainly in many companies. And we also do recommend connectivity should be a key topic for you should you wanted to adopt Industry 4.0. Having a real-time connected organization will be and could be beneficial in this pandemic time, and even for you to effectively manage and optimize your operations, let it be your shop floor operations, your enterprise operations, or even your supply chain operations. With that being said, I'll just come to my last slide before I pass the mic back to Ted. Just Ted, bear with me for one more minute. I know that I ran out of time. We do want to recommend to you, if you wanted to adopt Industry 4.0 in this pandemic time, or even to improve your company competitiveness, do look into a three-step approach. Number one, initiations. Start to develop your own understanding of Industry 4.0, having a benchmark to know where are you compared to your peers and identify your gaps. And point number two, solutioning. Really start to define what could be your visions of your factory, what could be your vision of your organizations, and define what could be the future steps. It's only when you know what is your visions, only when you know what would you like your future step to be, then you can identify the relevant projects, and of course, identify the relevant business impact to your organization. Because at the end of the day, we will not deploy any solution if there's simply no ROI, return on investment. So keep that in mind. There must be a visions and future steps before you define the relevant projects and the respective return on investment. Third point, implementation and operations. It's only when you have a clear visions, a clear ROI, that is where company can start to implement specific projects to ensure a seamless integrations. Keep in mind, integrations to your current operating model. So these are the 3 steps approach that we wanted to recommend to you as part of your transformations or as part of your digitalization journey towards Industry 4.0. And with that, I came to the end of my slide. So thank you very much for your time. And of course, I hope you enjoy my sharings and what you could do to minimize the disruptions in this pandemic time. So back to you, Ted, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Jackie, for the wonderful presentation. I'm sorry we didn't have too much time for that, but I think you managed to share a lot of information and insights in this topic. If I may, I think it's really an interesting and impressive presentation, because I think Jackie is trying to address 2 layers of issues. One is how to respond to this COVID-19 situation, and the other is, in the long run, how do you actually address the issues about productivity and performances in the manufacturing sectors or for the manufacturers. So I think it's a brilliant presentation. And if I may, this is my notes from his presentation.
Oh, okay.
I think in this sharing, the resilience is actually built in the information or knowledge on our vulnerability, and flexibility and agility are the key to respond to changes and crises. And to do that, digitization may be the first step to collect the information, collect knowledge, and other technologies may be employed to further build the resilience and performances. And it may be realized into a more decentralized situation in the supply chains. Another interesting point that I gathered from Jackie's sharing is that technology is an enabling tool rather than the endpoint itself. It's an enabling tool, and the key is that it has to be combined with productivity improvement, mindset, techniques, and management, such as lean manufacturing and other insights or practices to actually realize the benefits of digitalization and the benefits of advanced technologies. So, but feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, Jackie.
No, spot on, Ted. You're qualified now, spot on.
So I can take the next class from you, right? So
join me in my journey.
But also we are getting questions and discussions from our viewers. So maybe I'll start with the first one, which is what may be the immediate measures for small and medium-sized enterprises to reduce the negative impact from the pandemic. Say for an SME, what can be the immediate measures for them to deal with the current situation, and how to start, for example?
Right. Very often, if I mention, if you remember the five M I raised just now, the man, the machines, your methods, right? Your materials, and finally your measures. I would recommend you as a company, especially an SME, do try and evaluate where you are in these 5 areas. Do let's say what we call assessment. How is your workforce management? All right, how many workforce you're gonna deploy in your factory? Because very often they still do not have a good understanding about that. How is your machines? Are your machines ready to manufacture certain products? Okay. Materials. How's your materials right now? Are they still in your warehouse, or you actually have lack of materials? Then you need to know first. All right. Third point, your method. Is your manufacturing method still valid? Do you have a different requirements from your customers? Do you need to reevaluate your manufacturing methods? And finally, measure. Well, how does your customers measure performance? You may also first check with your customers what is relevant for you as a business, because at the end of the day, you need to produce products. You need to produce products that is relevant to your customers. So do measure that with your clients. How is your performance measures and how your customers perceive your products? And then with this measure, then you are able to react to the other 4. All right, do look into all these 5 as one, because with one missing, you may struggle to go to the, let's say, the new normal. So do look into these 5 elements as a whole, measure them accordingly, understanding where you are in these 5 elements, then make the right decisions, which area you need to start with. Is it the workforce that is your key area? Or is it the material that's your key area? And try to find a balance. You know, we talk about the balance scorecard. Similar approach, how do you apply a balance scorecard to these 5? Any of them fail, you have a huge challenge when it goes to a full operational organizations. So I urge you to look into 5M and try to start to understand where you are in this 5M of manufacturing.
I see, wonderful. So first step is always understand where you are, and then you can find the pain points to deal with it. And I guess it's also
talk to your customers, understanding your customers, let's say, needs. Because if you do not know your customer needs, you could be on the wrong track 100%. So please also engage your customers and understand what are the needs, what are the challenges, because we are there to help the customers, right? You are there as a manufacturer to make sure that you produce the right components, the right products for your customers. Right? Without customers, let's say, feedback, you do not know where you are today. You need to have this constant feedback with your customers.
I see. And I think it's also kind of linked to a question that I got because we were talking about understanding where you are. And I think that's the purpose of the Siri index that you mentioned before. So I got a question from actually my colleague. Can you elaborate more on the benefits of Siri realized in Singapore? Like the experience of applying Siri, and what is the benefit of this index and how it helps the industries?
Okay, there's 3 benefits I would like to elaborate when a company's implemented a Siri assessment. Number 1, the first benefit is intangible benefits. Companies get to really understand what is Industry 4.0, and that's the most important thing. When you deploy or when you implement Siri, you actually get to understand what is Industry 4.0 and what is the underlying principles. Okay. Second benefit is you have a good understanding, a good snapshot of your factory. All right, you know your factories in terms of 3 areas or 3 building blocks: process, technology, and organizations. You have a, let's say, in-depth understanding on your strength in your process, on your strength in your technology, and of course your strength in organization. But at the same time, you also know where are the gaps, where are the gaps you may need to fill, where are the gaps that is deemed the biggest, let's say a quick win potentially for your organization. The third point, prioritizations, right? Knowing where you are is good, but it's not sufficient, right? I just know where am I today in terms of Industry 4.0. The index itself, Siri itself, the Smart Industry Readiness Index itself also help companies to prioritize projects or to prioritize the organization in terms of the area that you should focus on. Like I mentioned just now in my presentation slides, would you focus on shop floor automations? Will you focus on supply chain resilience? Or actually you need to focus on your workforce learning and development. So this is also the prioritization, using Siri to help you to understand Industry 4.0, knowing where you are in the context of Industry 4.0, and finally prioritize the area where you should focus on.
I see, right. Wonderful. I see actually it's quite a very practical methodology.
For companies to understand where they should move forward.
Yeah, so you have a very, very clear set understanding of steps to take on. That's brilliant. I also got a question from India, from Yadu Yadav. His question is, what is the impact of Industry 4.0 in supply chain with respect to employment, specifically in the post-COVID-19 era? Okay. So I think we are talking about digitalization, automation, using technologies, but there are concerns about employment. So what's your view on this? What may be the impact?
I will see this impact on a very positive level. First of all, if a companies were to deploy Industry 4.0 to supply chain, number 1, they're able to have an integrated or even connected supply chain management that allows the companies to better manage the supply chain operations, such that they are better in planning and preparing the factory operations. Because if they know certain products or certain raw materials is coming at a certain time, they can actually better plan. Because very often we see that many companies struggling with the as accurate planning. If you were to go to the floor, go to the ground, ask the planner, ask the manufacturing planner, how accurate is your planning? Do you actually measure your planning accuracy? And very often they will come to you and say, we can discuss it at a time, because there are many companies struggling to have an accurate plan, and simply because their lack of supply chain visibility. And by having integrations or even Industry 4.0 on supply chain, it allows you to have full visibility of your supply chain. It also allows you to optimize supply chain, let it be your distribution partners, your raw materials, or even your factory. Because at that time, when you do a planning, you know exactly your raw materials, your workforce, and you can better plan accordingly based on your workforce availability or even your machines availability. Simply what I'm trying to say is that if your raw materials is not here today, there's no need for the machines to start. You can save a lot of money by not starting the machines. If that's the case, right? If you know that today my raw materials will not arrive because I can see right now the materials are stuck at somewhere in the sea. They can actually say, let's not start the operation, because I'm actually wasting energy resources to start my machines, because simply I cannot operate the machines at all. So it actually helps you in many, many positive areas.
I see. So here you're, I think, emphasizing the benefits of using technologies to optimize the operations, where actually human resources can be more efficiently leveraged.
Yep.
And I have a question related to human capital. So what may be your recommendations or observations in terms of upskilling in the era of digitalization or automation or Industry 4.0 in general? In terms of upskilling, what may be your recommendation, or what may be, for example, the practice in Singapore, for example,
right,
from your observation?
Yeah, as you know that the way we do it, typically we deploy Siri, we implement Siri to help companies to understand their workforce learning and development, let's say, capability. And typically we say that for you as a company, first of all, there should be a skills assessment metrics. As a company, have you actually completed or designed and executed a skills assessment metrics? You need to know what is the capability of your workforce. And then when you started your transformation journey towards the factory of the future, you may deploy or implement new technologies. And you may need to start to redefine what could be your future skills assessment metrics, right? We are having a proper skill assessment metrics. You do not know how do you upskill it. You may say, today we have robots. Let's deploy my engineers to become robot programmers. Tomorrow we have, let's say, a new wonderful machines. Let's deploy my workforce to learn the new wonderful machines. But there's a missing what we call a baseline, what we call a skill assessment metrics. So I do recommend, as a company, do implement a skills assessment metrics for today, but also design what could be your future skills assessment metrics for your organization as part of your transformation journey.
I see. So now, I mean, it's not necessarily like tomorrow I have to become an engineer or a rocket scientist.
Yeah. No, not necessarily. You need to know where are you today. Once again, you need to deploy a basic foundation. What are the necessary skills for your factory to operate, and what are the necessary skills for your future factory to operate? Without that understanding, you are just upskilling your workforce in the wrong path. You really have to understand what are the, let's say, basic skill sets you require now and in the future. Then you can start to deploy certain trainings, certain upskilling costs accordingly.
I see. So I see that the Industry 4.0 discussion is a lot about technology, connections, internet. But I want to ask a question for our audience who are mostly from SMEs or industries.
Sure.
So from your experience, or from the experience working with EDB in Singapore, how much time and investment does it take to start this journey for digitization or digitalization? Because sometimes it can look very overwhelming when we talk about deploying sensors, when we talk about using robots or the latest technologies, or the workforce who can understand this technology. But from your experience, or practically speaking, how much time, how much investment that is required to start this journey?
Right. I'll be speaking from my experience. That would be, let's say, more comfortable for everyone. Typically, we see that the time, let's say, time and money, right, is a factor. Of course, it's an important factor. But before SME or industry start to look into the time and the money, do look into how about your let's say knowledge of Industry 4.0. Without this knowledge, without a proper strong foundation of Industry 4.0 knowledge, time and money doesn't necessarily play a key role at the beginning. Because very often we have, based on my experience, I've seen that many companies actually spend a lot of money, spend a lot of time, but they also, let's say, experience what we call many white elephants. All right, basically the project just fell. It lasts for 3 months and it fell. So very often we see that leadership competency, or how leaders understand Industry 4.0, how the leaders design a transformation journey, it's critical. It's only by then you will, let's say, better understand what is the time and effort required. And to be honest, my experience shows that very often the amount of time the leaders need to spend is quite tremendous comparing to the time for implementation. If they give you a baseline, I couldn't comment the cost because it all depends on the understanding of the leadership team. So if you are a leader from your companies, do look into the time that you spend to understand the concepts instead of spending, let's say, time for implementation and time for and money for implementation. So I would recommend, as a leadership team, do some, let's say, understanding about Industry 4.0. But for example, start to baseline where you are today in the whole Industry 4.0 transformation journey. Then you can have better understanding what are the amount of effort and cost for implementation, because sometimes actually it's not just implementation or spending money. It could be as easy as having let's say a huge, let's say process management or process improvement for your organization that simply doesn't cost any technology investment. So I will always recommend, the leadership team should first have a good understanding about Industry 4.0. Then you can have a better gauge what is the time and money required. For now,
wonderful.
We can't judge for that. Yeah.
Wonderful. I think it's a very, very practical suggestion and answer, actually, because it's very difficult to generalize. And the bottom line is actually to understand where you are and what can actually help you. So it's not necessarily a paradox or a question about technologies or spending. It's about if you are ready and what can you do to better yourself or better your businesses. I think it applies to everywhere and to all the different scenarios. So thank you for that, for the insight. A lot of our audience are also policymakers or industries that form associations to support industries. So do you have any recommendation for policymakers or for industrial associations so that they get to help their audience or the industries to level up a little bit more or to upgrade a little bit faster? Or what may be your observations or experiences that you see in Singapore, for example? We know Singapore, the government is always a very, very fast and proactive one to support industries. So can you share with us your observations on that?
Yeah, but based on my observation, I think that policymakers or even industry should really come from a concerted effort and integrated efforts. No longer you have your own silos objective. Well, as a policymaker, I will always recommend, because in the industry, from end user perspective, there could be too many approaches, and they might struggle to say which is the right way forward. So it may be helpful if everyone come together to come to an integrated, concerted effort to help the industry to grow. We also say that learning is a given. You have to do it, right? As part of any transformation or as part of any industrial revolution, there's always a learning aspect of it. However, it's also for the industry or for the policymakers to really foster this learning. Our role is to help to foster and facilitate this learning and to help them along the journey, give them some guidelines, what they could do as an immediate next steps. And very often we see that the immediate next step could be very diluted because everyone has their own recommended next step. So it will be great for policymakers or even for associations to come together actually and to have a concerted effort to help the industry to grow and to stay competitive.
I see. Thank you very much. So the suggestion is that to have a closer collaboration across government, the sectors, the intermediates, maybe.
Definitely.
Great, wonderful. Actually, I think time really flies. We're approaching to an end of this discussion or this productivity talk. Before we conclude, do you have any message, like the final one-liner message for our audience as a quick takeaway from today's discussion, or your suggestion in general?
Yeah, thank you, Ted. So let's say my final advice or key advice for everyone is that do see this pandemic time as an opportunity for you to transform or even to better understand your business. Based on my understanding is that this is really an opportunity for you to really transform or to really, let's say, explore different business opportunity. Don't take this as a negative impact, but I do see this as an opportunity for you to really transform or to grow your business in a very competitive approach globally. Thank you, Ted.
Wonderful. I think it's a very, very positive note, a message. I agree that we are in a very, very difficult time, but actually it's a good opportunity for us to examine what we have been good at or what we have been not good at. Again, back to your previous presentation, then we get to know where we are, and then we can better ourselves, which I think is the point of increasing or enhancing productivity overall, because we are always seeking constant improvement. So I would like to thank you, Jackie, for today's sharing. And I would also like to share with our audience that the APO will continue. During this difficult time or after this difficult time, the APO will still continue work with our audience to improve productivity in our member countries. And so please stay with us and utilize our multi-country projects, in-country projects. We are always in close collaboration with our national productivity organizations in your countries. So do get in touch for that. And thank you for joining us in this productivity talk. We have another one scheduled for 2 days later. That'll be about basic income, especially. I think it's an important topic in this difficult time as well. So stay tuned. And there is an easy way to do so. You can just subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or other social media. We are everywhere. So, so stay tuned and let's work it out together. So I would like to thank Jackie again for sharing with us your insights and experiences. I look forward to seeing you in person after this situation, and I hope to see our audience sometime later. So thank you again, and stay safe, stay healthy, and stay sane if you're doing quarantine. Okay, so I'll see you around. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, and have a good one. Take care.
Thank you. Take care. Ciao.